Following a football club can be a strenuous pastime, especially for fans wanting to support their local teams week in, week out. Recently, more fans and journalists believe that it's becoming more difficult and taxing for fans to support their clubs at the top level of the Premier League. Today, it seems more working class supporters are being priced out of attending live games in the Premier League. It also feels like clubs are not doing enough to alleviate the prices to help traditional loyal supporters to follow their clubs. I intend to investigate and understand the problems rising ticket prices have on the working class supporters in today's modern game.
Well, it's interesting because Chelsea used to draw an awful lot of its support from the local area. Not just Fulham, but southwest London. Now it's much more spread, and I'm not sure. I don't think it's just Chelsea, but I'm not sure the clubs do enough in terms of trying to attract local people. To be fair, Chelsea and Fulham has changed. Fulham used to be a working class area a generation ago. It's now houses £1 million, and it's changed dramatically. And that's a separate issue, the gentrification of particularly of London. But I would think, working class is a hard term to sort of pin down. But what you see is traditional working class people would feel increasingly alienated from football because they just can't afford to go. People on minimum wage couldn't possibly afford to go to Premiership football, for example. You just couldn't. If you're earning £6.50, £7 an hour, £300 a week, there's no way you could afford to spend £800 on a season ticket when your income is so low. So it automatically prices out people at the lower end of the income scale. And what is difficult as well is talking to people. People go and then they stop. I carried on going to home games, but I didn't do away games for about 10 years because the family were young and I was travelling a lot. And now what you find is that people aren't necessarily coming back. When as life changes, people's priorities change. You get to my age, in your 50s, and maybe you've got more time. The kids have grown up, they've left home, so you've got more time. But people aren't necessarily going back, either they can't afford it, or it's not the game they loved. I know some people who've written about Chelsea who don't go anymore. But they're all fans, but they just don't like the atmosphere compared with what it was a generation ago.
Rising ticket prices are that's the main problem for the fans when it comes to working class, because they really can't afford any matches, or pretty much not a lot of matches, to the stadium, and they like to watch the football matches on the pubs or even in the house. So that's not gonna help any of the working class people to bring the working class people to the stadium to watch the match.
Well, football is often described, British football is often described as a working class sport, and in many ways that's true historically, but it's also simplistic because originally the game was dominated by the public schools, the higher social classes, and then working class clubs began to be established towards the end of the 19th century. But even then, working class people never ran football clubs. They were never in charge of clubs. So working class people have played the game, and substantial part of the audience has watched the game, but working class people have never run the game. They've never had control of the game, even though they might imagine their relationship to football is different in the past than it seems to be today.
I think the fans have sort of changed a lot in their approach to football, with the way that they pay for the games, and we go to Champions League games and stuff like that away. We went to Paris, but we go to Oxford United quite a lot as well, just because that's where we're from. But definitely at games like this, there's definitely less working class fans. I personally don't care about class of fans that watch games. I couldn't care less if somebody's upper class, lower class. It doesn't bother me what sort of calibre of fan goes to watch the game. As long as people fill the stadium, I couldn't care less, to be honest.
It's an interesting point you say about, what was the second point you had to say then? Yeah, they do see you as just a number. I don't think they care about as you as a fan much anymore. It's just money.
If I told you I paid £100 each ticket for my tickets today
From a ticket line.
because I can't get them because I'm not a season ticket holder in the town I come from, there you go, says it all, doesn't it? I could not afford to come again.
I think the normal working class person can't afford to visit the top clubs now because it's too expensive.
I mean, it's more of a day out or an occasional.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. As I say, my bucket list.
Yeah.
That's it.
Would you be watching it in the pub or at home rather than coming here normally?
Normally on the telly.
I'm normally at home on the telly because you can have your cups of tea when you want and you have a break when you like. We do go to the City matches in Leicester, but the tickets are around about 48. It's more because it's a smaller club, you see.
Yeah.
But to go to the bigger clubs like Chelsea and all the other big ones, you have to pay, and it's very hard for us.
Yeah, and a lot of the die-hard old-style fans that used to stand up in the stands before they were all seated, they're priced out, especially in the London clubs.
So if they brought the prices down, I think more people would go, and if they made it more family-orientated, I think people would go.
I think the big surge in prices was when the Premier League started, 1990 to 2000. Chelsea, last 10 years, they've kept pace with inflation. They've had price freezes most year. When they put them up, it's not by that much. I think they realise they can't put them up significantly. I don't think it's about them going up. I think it's about them coming down. I don't see that they'll go up by, clubs will put up ticket prices by more than the rate of inflation generally, unless, of course, teams that get promoted might do it. But I think they've realised they can't go much further on pricing.
I think that somehow people feel, because of this historical link, because working class clubs and working class people have played a central role in the game for so long, and I think because in some respects people think if you're working class and you live locally to the club, then you're somehow more authentic, more important, that you feel more deeply about the club because football means more to your life than maybe it does to more middle class people, that working class people invest more emotionally in the club. And of course, in terms of a proportion of their income, they pay more to watch football. So I think a lot of these arguments now are about who are the authentic fans, and that working class people feel sometimes that because the game has gentrified a bit, that it's attracting in people who don't feel deeply about their clubs, who just see football as a part of a leisure experience, and that working class people have a different relationship to the game. And I think there's something to that. I think there's a bit of inverted class snobbery involved as well, but I think there is something to that argument. I think what Richard Giulianotti does, which I think is very useful, is that he doesn't just opt for a working class fans, middle class fans model. He says we need to understand that fandom is complicated now, and that people connect with the game in a number of different ways, and that actually there are lots of different types of fans these days, some of whom never even attend a football match, but they have different kinds of relationships with the game. And I think that's certainly one of the features of globalization and late modern life.
Well, if I could afford to come, I would come, but I think they're too high at the moment. I can't really justify
I mean, do you go to games a lot often?
I go to a lot of home games for teams near me, but I never really can afford to come up to see big games. This is like one of my first ones in a long time.
And what would be a reasonable price for paying the ticket?
I don't know really, like the way because Bayern Munich, for example, like in the Bundesliga, like all their tickets are so cheap because they're saying like they can't make money without fans in the first place. So
do you think the clubs here in London, specifically London, do you think they're doing enough for their fans?
No,
I don't.
I think they should be a lot cheaper than they are. Yeah, there's quite a few people here, but it is a lot harder for the working class to come in. That's that's a fact.
That's the crux of the matter.
If you weren't here, would you say you'd watch it at home and go to a pub instead?
Oh, 100%. This is just a bit of a luxury, really.
Yeah, it is really. Especially
I think they can drop it down. They're not doing enough. They can bring the prices down differently because they won't lose much by bringing the prices down because they're earning much from the TV rights and this and that, so they're earning much more money.
I think one of the things that's changed, they talk about consumers and customers and the brand. they'll talk about the Chelsea brand, the Liverpool brand, Man United having global sponsors here and partners. And that, for people of my generation, that's completely alien to what football used to be about. And I struggle with the concept, but I know they have to do it because other clubs do it, and that, it's completely changed. The main income used to be ticket prices, people paying to go in. TV money was very low, and there was no sponsorship. This would be in the 60s, yeah. Now the big money is TV money, followed by sponsorship, followed by the ticket money. So the big money is the TV money, which is why the clubs could do more about bringing ticket prices down, or doing more for young people, or whatever. Particularly when the new deal kicks in August 2016.
What really pushed away traditional English class fans? Was it the Hillsborough disaster and the Taylor report?
Yeah, I think that's part of the answer. Those are the things that have been going on inside football that have helped produce the change. The Hillsborough disaster happened. We had a modernisation programme for Premier League stadiums, particularly all-seated stadiums. The fences were taken down, and then Sky's new relationship with the Premier League from 1992 has marketed the game differently, made it more exclusive, made it more attractive to new types of supporters, and clearly that all has had an impact on a working class connection with the game. Partly because, as a result of some of those changes, prices have gone up, and as the game has recruited global stars, then other types of people have wanted to watch, have wanted to connect with the game. The game has become glamorous in the way that it wasn't in the 1970s and 1980s. It had a very different image then. So I think there's a few things going on inside the game that have made incredible impacts. But as Anthony King and other people have also argued, social class itself is changing. It was much harder to identify the old traditional working class. And the wider impacts of globalisation are clear too, that clubs no longer market themselves only to domestic fans or local fans. They market themselves as transnational organisations, leisure organisations. So clubs like the Manchester Uniteds and the Liverpools and the Arsenals and the Manchester Cities even see themselves as global entities and see themselves as having to deal with a global audience as well as a local one. All of that has changed. Those wider structural and socio-economic changes have also reshaped the kind of product that football is. In the old days, in the era of modernism, before the kind of late globalization that we're in now, it was simple. We knew what fans were. They were people who went to games. Now that simplicity has gone. They're a particular type of fan. They're the live attenders. They're the people who feel their attendance is more authentic. But we know that we have to think about the way in which fandom is done by some other people differently, and that might mean they buy products around the club. It might mean they watch on television. They might watch in a pub with other supporters, maybe because they feel excluded or it's too expensive to go and watch. Or they may live in another country completely, and because they don't live in Manchester or Liverpool or London or any of the cities here, they can't expect to come to matches, but they still get up at incredibly unsociable times to watch English football clubs on television. And I think it's a big debate. Should we call these fans? How should we describe their relationship with the game? And I think what Richard has done is to say, look, fandom has changed. I don't see what else they can do. The only thing that fans can do is the thing that they're most reluctant to do for obvious reasons, and that is withdraw their own fandom, as Newcastle fans tried to do. And that is the only thing that fans have. But everybody knows, as I said earlier, that this is not a product like any other product. You can't swap it for something else. Interestingly, while the club has been closed down to certain kinds of people, right, poorer people, people who've unemployed, maybe some local people who can't afford to go, it's been opened up to other people, non-local people, people from minority communities, more women come. So it's not a completely bleak story. There are some people who've been who've been closed out, other people who've been let in. And the other thing which has happened to kind of counter the negative impact of exclusion is live television coverage. So now in Liverpool or similar cities around the country, because people are smart and they know where to go to watch, you could pretty much watch every Liverpool game on TV in a pub or a bar around the city. So again, you know, in the 70s and 80s, if you were excluded for any reason, because you couldn't get in, because games were sold out, because you lived a long way away, or for any of those other kinds of reasons, if you weren't able to attend the match, you just didn't see the club. Now, that's very different. Now you can never go to see a live game in the stadium, but you can see every game live, and so that has produced a different kind of relationship between local people and the club. And of course, it's very important for clubs like Liverpool that they have local support, because very often that's strangely what global supporters want. They don't just want a connection with the club, they want a connection with the city. It's the fact that the club is in Liverpool with all that means, which is also important to global fans. So the global link, the local link is important for the global audience. And so, you know, with the new television deals and live television coverage, and the way in which people can get access to global feeds, so you know, you can go and watch Liverpool play Hull City in a couple of days' time, because somebody around the world will be showing it, and some pubs have got a link to that network. So in a strange way, as people have been excluded from the stadium, the market has been opened up via television for people to get connected. It's an interesting new dynamic around top level football.